any application that can be written in JavaScript will eventually be written in JavaScript. Hello everyone, this is me Rachit Jain and welcome to yet another video. The previous quote that I just read is famously known as the Edwards Law. And when I first read it, it really took a lot of my attention. The next thing I did was just to look back in retrospect and search the internet to actually understand what it really means. So talking about web development, I think JavaScript is probably the only language which allows you to write the front end as well as the back end using JavaScript. There are so many technologies that have been built on top of JavaScript and they really allow you to build the back end as well as front end. So if you just know JavaScript, I think it really opens your gate as a developer to empower you to do really a lot of things because you are becoming a full stack engineer just by JavaScript. The next cool thing is that if you talk about building cross-platform desktop apps, now this is also possible using JavaScript, HTML and CSS, and that's where Electron.js comes into picture. I think it was quite shocking for me to realize that Microsoft's IDE, the famous IDE, Visual Studio Code, is built on top of Electron. Moving on to the Android and iOS apps, we have React Native for that, and it basically you write a single source code and then you can use that to build binaries which you can use on PCs, on tablets, on mobiles. So I think this is a journey that every developer goes, wherein you start off your career maybe as a back-end engineer or front-end engineer. You know a certain set of languages, and in my case when I was at Microsoft, I think by the time I quit Microsoft around 6 months back in January 2019, I was pretty much good with languages like C++ and C# thanks to Microsoft, and Python and JavaScript were two languages which I had been doing myself since I was in like school, and I was really good at those languages as well because I think once you are comfortable, like you have really strong roots in just one programming language, you can easily write and juggle around different programming languages. So I had been using Python and JavaScript to do like really quick tasks for me just because Python syntax and JavaScript syntax are like really easy and they allow you to do things faster. I mean, again, that's what I feel. If you feel anything different, please let me know in comments. So in Microsoft, I did learn to build like really scalable web services using the Azure Web Services and Cloud Technologies. But talking about personal experience, I think if we talk about the backend side of our projects, I was pretty much sure that I will pick up Django over like C# any day because the .NET, I mean the ASP.NET is quite old. Uh, so the performance of that is not that good as compared to the today's world. Microsoft has actually fixed that problem by introducing .NET Core, which is kind of like really cool stuff. It's also open source, by the way. But at that point of time, I realized that having to spend more time in .NET Core like really won't be useful for me at that point of time. So I continued to learn more of Python Django, and because I was already familiar with it and the performance with Django was pretty good, like even Instagram uses Django. The other thing which I really faced a lot of difficulty was learning React and Redux. So JavaScript was something which I was already familiar with, but React and Redux were kind of like really cool technologies that I would say that have come into existence, and I was really, it was difficult for me to get started with React and Redux. So why am I doing all this? Like I think I uploaded recently a video on my decision to become a full stack developer and what are the perks associated with that. So please feel free to check that out. In this video, I just want to cover the journey of JavaScript. Why am I learning JavaScript, and also what are some of the things that you might miss thinking that you know JavaScript, but in reality you don't. Okay, so that's the main intent of this video. First, to share why JavaScript is important, and as we have seen, you can tremendously find ample amount of opportunities if you are really good with JavaScript, because you can see building Android apps, iOS apps, backend, front end, desktop apps. JavaScript allows you to do all those things. So that's the one reason. And second is that I think to be a really successful developer, you need to continue to invest your time in learning new technologies, expanding your skill sets, and then more importantly, you also have to develop the strong fundamentals behind that underlying basic programming language. So in case of Django, the underlying programming language is Python. And I think just being good with Django is not that good. You should also spend your time learning the basics of the programming language. And when I'm saying the basics of programming language, what I mean is like you can of course spend more and more time to learn more advanced concepts. And I think that's super useful to be a really successful developer. Alright, so maybe you think that you know JavaScript because that's how I thought, because I was able to write code in JavaScript, which means I know JavaScript, right? But yeah, that's not how it works. And if you are a beginner or intermediate JavaScript developer, so to speak, I would definitely suggest you to check out this video till the end, because now I'm starting off with few JavaScript concepts that I feel beginner and intermediate developers often miss out. So the next picture that we have over here is very easy to interpret. Like we can see in JavaScript, which is on the top picture, you can see that a variable can store integer value, and then during the runtime, the value in that variable can change to a string. And that's what we call dynamically typed language, and that's what JavaScript is. As compared to C++, which is a statically typed language, you cannot do the same, which is demonstrated in the below screenshot. So the main learning for this was to understand what exactly does static and dynamic typed languages mean, because I think when you're talking professionally with developers or with recruiters or with interviewers, you should know such terms. Alright, moving on to data types in JavaScript. I think we have a very interesting story of null and nan. But the primary data types in JavaScript, if we talk about, they are number, string, object, undefined, and null. Alright, so what is the interesting story of null? If you will see line number 7, we are actually console.log type of null, and it actually prints object, which is really shocking because the type of null should be null, right? But it's an object, and we'll see that part later, like why is it so. The other interesting thing is that on line 14 and 15, I try to parse int function and send in a string, like I send my name, which is really stupid. Of course, we will never get an integer from a name, but that's what I try to do, and it prints that on line 15 the output for that is not a number, which is nan. The interesting story about nan is here. So I try to parse int and send in my name to that function, and I store the return value in x. So of course when I try to log it down, it prints nan. But do you notice line number 3, 4 and 5? So when I'm trying to check whether x is double equal to nan, it says false. When I try to do nan is double equal to nan, it still says false. And when I try to do nan is not equal to itself, it says true. And that is really crazy. Like if you have to check whether a variable is actually not a number, the way you do it in JavaScript is basically saying whether that number or that variable is not equal to itself. And if that returns true, it means it's not a number. And just to save developer basically this weird character, all browsers, when they implement JavaScript, they have this isNaN function which takes care of this thing that we just discussed. Another interesting story is about the type of null and why is it an object and not null. Well, it turns out that the way JavaScript was written before, it's actually kind of a bug, and it can't be fixed now. At this point of stage, it's too late to fix that, and that's how it will stay probably. So type of null is an object in JavaScript. Alright, I'm sure that this is something which took you by surprise, but let's wait and continue with this video, because I'm sure there are many more surprises yet to come. So scope of variables is something which we feel that we are really comfortable with, but now let's understand this in this function. So on the left hand side, in the first 4 lines, we are having a for loop which is basically iterating using the variable I, and we are using the var keyword of JavaScript to do that. So it will run for 0, 1, 2 and 3, and then it will exit the for loop. Now on line 5, do you think whether I will still be alive? Well, I think if you are coming from C, C++ or Java background, it would turn that the variable I should be in the scope of that for loop only. But in JavaScript, the variable scope, I mean the var keyword, turns the scope of that particular variable not in that block, and that is something which many people don't know. So we can see on line 5 it's actually still alive and we get the value 4. Also, the one interesting interview question, and it's like really famous, is that we have an empty array initially and then we iterate for I from 0 to 100 and then we keep on appending new functions to our array. So the array is actually an array of functions, okay? And then so the ith function in the array is doing nothing but it's console.log I, so it will print I to the output. Alright, so if you do arr0 and if you call arr1 functions, they should ideally print 0 and 1, but as you can see over here, all of them are printing 100, and that's how the scope of var works. After the for loop ends, the value of I is 100 and that's what is getting printed. And in ES6, which is the new version of JavaScript, this is actually fixed by basically you introducing more keywords like let and const. I'm pretty much sure const keywords is something you all are familiar with. Let is something which is a normal scoped variable like in other languages like C++. So now in this case, as we can see on line 5, I is undefined because we are using let keyword instead of var, and that makes the scope of variable I reside in that particular block where it was defined. Similarly, the error of that anonymous I value coming to be 100 when you are calling the arr0 and arr1 functions seems to be fixed now. Alright, moving on. Let's quickly move on to classes in JavaScript. So to define a simple class in JavaScript, it looks something like this, wherein we have a constructor where you can pass arguments and then you can basically use this keyword to add properties to that particular class. You can also have functions in the class, like we have this distance function, which is doing nothing but returning the distance of that particular point from origin. So the line number 7 is like a fancy thing. It's called destructuring in JavaScript, wherein instead of using this.x into this.x plus this.y into this.y, I'm simply using x star x plus y star y. So I have destructured the value of this.x into x and the value of this.y into y. That's a fancy way of doing that in JavaScript. And then in the line 12, we have declared a new point variable with the coordinates being 3 and 4. And when we try to print the distance of them, it of course comes out to be 5. So alright, maybe you knew all these things. If not, it's better that you just learned how classes are declared in JavaScript. But here is one thing which you might have missed. So if you talk about pure JavaScript classes, you cannot do something like line 2. So in JavaScript, you can have functions defined inside the class, but you cannot define properties outside the constructor. And this is something which JavaScript beginner developers of course miss out. I'm also sure that intermediate developers also miss this out. So pure JavaScript classes do not allow that. In React, however, these things are there, but that's a different story. And I just wanted to convey this because when you're giving interviews for front end, and if someone asks you this basic question and you make a mistake, it really shows that you really haven't spent or you have not done your homework in learning JavaScript like the hard way. So of course, when you try to run this, you get a syntax error, as I have just discussed. And the thing is, even I didn't knew all those things, but I have done so many courses, almost 9, on advanced JavaScript concepts, React, Redux, and more. And like that's how my lifestyle looks like. Instead of binge watching Netflix, I am so passionate about learning and building things that I use that time in watching courses, other videos, reading on the internet, and learning all these things. So that's how I in fact came to know about this particular difference in the JavaScript classes. Alright guys, time for our sponsors, and today's video is being sponsored by Educative. It's a great website for tutorials, and they have not video lectures, but they have written notes so that you can read them while you are traveling or you are in a meeting which is like really boring and you want to use your time. And the today course that I want to sponsor is this React for front-end developers. So the total cost for this is $286, but you're really getting it at 70% off, so it comes down to $86, and because you also have 35% regional discount for India. Also, one thing is that they have 30-day returns. It's a self-paced course and you have lifetime access to this. So guys, one more thing, if you use the coupon Rachit20 on this particular course, you will get 20% more off. So that $86 will basically get reduced to almost $68. And you get 4 courses for this. Like, this is a learning track. It's not just a single course. It's a collection of 4 courses which begins off with JavaScript fundamentals before learning React. Once you are comfortable with the major or the important JavaScript concepts, they move on to the road to learn React, where they introduce React and the components and how it works. Then they move on to integrating Firebase with React. So Firebase is like a Google product. It's kind of like the replacement for backend, and it's like really quick for testing out for personal projects, and you can also use it for production. But since it's relatively new, I would question that using this for production, is it more stable, or so basically I have some concerns with that. But of course, for personal projects, it's super quick, and of course it's cheap, and it's backed by Google. So yeah, it's pretty good. Then we have React and Patterns as the last course in this. So you can get all these 4 courses just for $68 by using Rachit20 as the coupon. Also, I would really suggest you to first go to their website and have a look at their free preview, because that will basically give you a fair idea before buying this product, so you can see what does the content look like, and if you really feel satisfied, of course you can enjoy the 20% off, guys. Alright, coming back to the video, everything in JavaScript is an object. Okay, so when you declare functions, they are objects. When you declare objects, of course they are objects. When there is null, well, unfortunately type of that is an object. But just to demonstrate what I'm talking about, again I'm having the same class. I declare a new object of point with same coordinates 3 and 4. Then what I'm doing is I'm having that dist function, but now I'm basically changing the content of that. I'm converting that to a string. I mean, we can change the value of a variable from integer to string or string to integer, but it's like really, I would say, what is that word? Supernatural. Yeah, it looks supernatural to me that we have just changed a function into a string. Huh. And now when I'm calling that on line 13, you can actually see that it's actually printing why change me. I mean, sorry bro, I didn't mean to do that. Alright, moving on, the magic of this pointer. Alright, we have again the same class. As you can see, the dist function is doing nothing but printing out the distance of that point from origin, and this variable is basically used to access the properties. But can you check this line 13 and 14? So I'm declaring a new object. I'm giving it a name new this, but it's essentially having x and y properties, and the value of that is 12 and 5. So now what I'm doing on line 14 is basically changing what the value of this represents in the function dist. And how do I do that? I basically call bind on the dist function, which returns me a new function. The only difference is that this new function which is being returned, the value of this is now binded to something else. And what is that something else? It's actually the argument that you have passed. In this case, I have passed new this, and that's why when you call p.dist now, it actually prints 13, which is the distance of origin of our new point 12,5. And this is something which a lot of people like really are afraid of, because they have just heard about that this pointer in JavaScript is crazy, we can't understand it, it's so tough, and people make so long tutorials on this. I mean, of course, this like this video is also kind of long, but yeah, I mean, I'm covering a lot of topics first of all, and again, I will be missing a lot of things, a lot of good points, like let's forget that. Let's move on. Alright, the next thing is the syntax keeps getting better and better. So JavaScript, like there was ES5, ES6, then we have ES7. But the main thing is that since it's widely used, I have seen that JavaScript is improving day by day. Like if you talk about Lambda functions, so when I was at Microsoft, I was using C#, and I could see that Lambda functions are something pretty cool. Python also has that, but JavaScript had all these things before C#. So Just to iterate on the cool syntax, if you have an array, you can easily iterate on each element by using dot for each, and then the element is basically x. So basically x is representing each element as we iterate through our array, and then we are simply doing a console.log, so which prints 1 2 3 on the right hand side, as you can see. Next we have a dictionary, and the coolest thing is that since I'm a web developer, I have to deal with JSON in my life. And as you can see, JSON looks something like this, and when you do console.log, it's so cool that you can do something like d.x as well as d, and you pass in the square brackets with that string x to extract the value 1, and both of them actually work magically in JavaScript. I really love this one a lot. The next thing is the spreading operator. So if you have two arrays and you want to create a new array which is merged of the both of these two arrays, you can basically use the 3 ellipsis sign or the 3 dots and then pass in a and then the 3 dots and b. So basically it will create a new array 1 2 3 4 5 6, as you can see. Okay, and that we have also stored in C. Wow. Okay, moving on. We can also spread the dictionary. As you can see, the d is x1 y2, and then we have spread that in the line 10, and we have added a new property z. And now when I log that, as you can see on the right, we have x, y and z properties, and it's something which is so cool to use, and I really love it. Again, to fetch like if you have to hit a API to get something and parse that and convert that to JSON, all of that is coming out of the box, and it's so easy, just 3 lines to get the basic JSON structure. And if you talk about C++, oh my god, it's horrible. Alright, so this is something which I think might have interested you in learning JavaScript, and I also hope that some of the things that we discussed you probably did not know, and it was a shocking time for you as well. But yeah, I mean, there are so many things that I have missed out, and I'm so sorry for that. And of course, for experienced JavaScript developers, I am really sorry if I wasted your time, but I thought that these are some of the things which people do miss out, and it would be better to just cover this around. And also I wanted to talk about why JavaScript is important. So yeah, I mean, I hope this video really motivates you to learn JavaScript, and I would definitely ask you to write what you feel, what's going on in your mind in the comments down below. And if you think that I have missed out something, of course I have, but if you feel that there is genuinely something which people should also know, type that down in comments. Of course, we have prototype, inheritance, what are prototypes, then how objects work, what is deep and shallow copy. But I mean, yeah, this was an introductory video which took awfully long time. I really did not expect that, but I think you will join me in my journey. Oh, it's not my journey. I hope you will join me in your journey. Never mind. Let's have fun. Happy coding, guys. That's all I had for this video, and I will see you in the next one.